So as you know that President Ramaphosa has now suspended the police commissioner because of his case over the Matlala 360 million rands tender. In this video, I'm going to show you how experts slam Ramaphosa's action as a Hollywood suspension. And if you stay with me all the way till my biblical reaction, I think we're going to shine a spotlight on something you'll probably not hear in many places, but we have to, because South Africa will prosper. Ready? Press like, let's go. So,
the South African Police Service National Commissioner, General Fannie Masemola, on charges of contravention of the Public Finance Management Act. In consideration of the seriousness of these charges and the critical role that the National Commissioner of Police plays in leading the fight against crime, I have agreed with General Masemola that he be deemed to be on precautionary suspension pending the conclusion of the case. To ensure stability and continuity in the South African police force, I have appointed Lieutenant General Puleng Dimpane, who is standing right next to me here on the left-hand side, as the acting National Commissioner of Police. Having been in the police service for close on to 2 decades, she has extensive experience in policing, in strategic management, in financial management, and in governance. Lieutenant Dimpane has a reputation for professionalism as well as for integrity.
So the SAPS CFO, whom we showed in this video here, is now the acting police commissioner while Masemola is on paid leave. And so before we get to the experts that slam something about this suspension, let's hear the reaction from the party. So this is Madlanga, the lady who's most famous for telling investors to go invest in India in this video right here. Well, of course, she just sings the ANC's praises.
The president did face questions about one of your deployees, and that is the Minister Cyril Ramaphosa,
yes,
who is on a leave of absence, with some still feeling like he is dilly-dallying, if I may even use that word, from taking a decision on his future, and others are saying he's trying to manage some political dynamics behind closed doors. What is your reaction to some of the questions that are being raised there?
I do believe, and we do believe as the ANC, that because Minister Cyril Ramaphosa is still under investigation, there's no finality. It would not make sense for the president to just fire him. What if he's proven not to be associated with what he is accused of being associated with?
Really?
I think South Africans on this one, we should urge that they bear with the president for as long as the acting incumbents do take the police service forward. We would like the matter of Cyril Ramaphosa, we ourselves as the ANC, to be concluded as soon as possible. And we have been given those assurances. But what is important is to note that his issue is not outside of domain of Madlanga Commission, and so we should just pay enough.
Okay, so the fact that the guy went and sat with his grandkids on the 31st of December and wrote a letter, which he admits he did, which he had no authority to do because it's unlawful, it's interference. The ANC needs to hear more stuff. Anyway, and on the suspension of Masemola,
Puleng Dimpane is now the acting police commissioner. Your take?
It is to be welcomed. Even more exciting that it is a female, competent female person. It's very necessary to stabilize the entire criminal justice system, by the way, and the South African Police Service. It's also important to make sure that when we do this, because we follow due process, I've had a lot of questions, both from the media as well as, on the socials. You can't just expel or dismiss or somebody without any due cause. And that is why we have the Constitution that protects everyone. But what is more exciting, though, is the president reflecting on the anti-corruption measures that have been put in place, defying the notion that nothing is being done. People are being dismissed. Properties are being seized. And you can see that the system is really rolling. And we are really encouraged by that. There were questions about why do we need another commission. I think I've heard a lot of opinion makers saying, I've changed my mind. Otherwise, we would not have known about what is happening, and that is hidden. So we welcome the work that's being done by government to root out corrupt elements within the system. And for as long as we do that within the confines of the law, and I think that the work of the Madlanga Commission has been great so far.
Well, as we know, with all commissions, accused number one is the ANC. So the ANC is rooting out the ANC. So what does the DA say?
I called for it as soon as he appeared in court earlier this week. I'm glad that the step has been taken. It's important to understand that it's precautionary suspension. It doesn't find him guilty of anything. But I think for the integrity of the institution, or what's left of it rather, this is important. And it's an opportunity to clean house. Unfortunately, and I must be brutally honest about it, we've had this opportunity many times before. There were several opportunities in years past, and I don't think it was utilized effectively. But nevertheless, for now, it's the right move.
We have the Lieutenant General Puleng Dimpane acting in that particular position, and we do have the acting National Police Minister as well in that position. Do you think both of them currently are the right candidates to deal with some of the problems that we are seeing within the SAPS?
Look, in terms of the procurement crisis and corruption within the procurement space, I think that General Dimpane has a lot of experience about what has been done wrong over the past few years in that space. I think one of the big things that she'll be pressured about from all different spheres is the critical suspension that should happen to the head of supply chain management in the South African Police Service, Lieutenant General Puleng Dimpane, someone that had played a critical role in allowing Mr. Matlala and Medicare 24 to gain access to the South African Police Service. She was actually one of the people that flagged that specific contract and indicated that there is a risk to it. And obviously internal audit of the South African Police Service too, and General Fannie ignored this. And clearly the National Commissioner too, it took him almost 3 months to act, and millions upon millions of rands were paid in the process. Nevertheless, I think there's an opportunity there. I am concerned that she's not a career police member. I'm concerned, if we take spaces where, for example, gang violence is really prevalent, how would someone like that know what the approach should be to combat that? That doesn't mean to say she will be unsuccessful, but it's critical for her to surround herself with the correct people. And then lastly, with regards to Acting Minister Kachalia, I think it's an extremely difficult space to navigate. He is certainly knowledgeable on this space of organized crime, etc. Whether he will survive the political storms that constantly surface around the South African Police Service, I'm not so sure. Look, SAPS has been deliberately hollowed out for political reasons over the past 20 years, and we're now paying the price for that.
And as a committee, what about this office is not working that leads us to this particular moment all the time?
Well, the most critical part, in my opinion, is integrity management and political interference. The fact that for so many years we've seen that office being abused for political gain. We saw it years back when Jackie Selebi was appointed. He was still a member of the NEC of the ANC at that stage. Ria Peja at that stage, I think she awarded herself a 10-year service medal after hardly 2 years, amalgamation medal, etc. It made a mockery of the proud members and the legacy of good South African Police Service members and the respect that they deserve. So that office is an extremely complex office, but it will never be successful if we see the constant political interference that it has experienced over the years.
Well, what does the third largest party, the MK, have to say?
So what we have now is, a leadership of actors, an acting commissioner, an acting minister. And that just tells you, and it reeks of indecisiveness on the end of the president. What we're asking ourselves is the following. The issues in the country is the inherent problem of crime. It's a crisis. The question is, the person that has now been appointed to preside over, the police, she herself, as a CFO, presides over, procurement processes. But what we're seeing also at the same time is that by the president appointing this commissioner, acting commissioner, who was not a career police person. I mean, she doesn't have any experience when it comes to crime intelligence. She was really an auditor that came in as internal auditor in 2007. She ended up becoming economic affairs in the Free State, then appointed by Pashane, and then made a divisional by Sithole, and now finds herself, presiding over the country's security apparatus. If you look at the complexities and why we're here, it cannot be reduced to the PFMA. Because the question is, how are we going to have to deal with the inherent issue of crime and the problem that the police force has now found itself associated and, with criminal cartels? That's the big issue. It wouldn't be if the issue of the criminal cartels and the criminality in this country has been happening the way it is.
And I wonder, how do you begin as the official opposition to advise those in government to say that you need to deal with the issue of politics? How do you get politics out of the SAPS?
Well, the biggest problem that we have is that the Constitution is quite skewed because it allows the president to appoint the commissioner of police, which, and at the same time, if you look at what's happening even in security apparatus when it comes to intelligence, state security reports into the president's office. Now, that creates a serious crisis in itself because now it becomes a conflict of interest. Here's the reality. There's many other tenders out there that we know there's criminality. One of those being the Tembisa Hospital. His own nephew has never seen a day in court. Hangani Maumela, not a day in court. Not even himself in any dock or any commission. Now, who presides over the police and who presides over the apparatus of justice and the security cluster? The president himself. Who appoints the judges? It's the president himself. Who appoints the MPA head? It's the president himself. So the president has cushioned himself with people that surround him. Funny enough, today, his comment was when he was asked as to what's going to happen with Phala. The president said, well, I'll wait for the outcome of the judges that I have appointed, and whatever decision that they take, well, it will have been an outcome of the judges that I have appointed. Well, what does that say? And maybe he didn't hear himself in terms of what he was saying. That just shows you that, there's a conflict right there. So we need to look at how the police commissioner and most of these Section 9 institutions are appointed, because we cannot relinquish all power to the president. There needs to be some level of independence in there, and we need to find a mechanism of how we appoint these people without all political interference playing a role in their decision making.
Okay, so what does the fourth largest party, the EFF, have to say?
Is it what the EFF expected this afternoon?
It is, and I think it's what all people of South Africa expected. It's an indictment of the leadership and presidency that is characterized by suspension instead of action. And that is exactly what he did. We now have two top officials within the police, the Minister of Police, Dimpane, and now National Commissioner, Fannie, Masemola, who are going to be paid by the taxpayer to sit at home and drag out whatever judicial process they're being subjected to. And it's unfair on South Africans, and it shows you that the rot starts at the head, because they're not being held accountable because the person who appoints them, who is the President of the Republic of South Africa himself, is not being held accountable for Phala. So it's an indictment.
All right, Phala comes again. So let's hear what the experts are saying.
The challenge with it is that the repeated suspensions, right, have produced leadership paralysis. We've been here before, and it has constantly produced leadership paralysis because we rely heavily on acting appointments. We take heavy decisions and serious, complex decisions relying on acting appointments. And this has also impacted on the declining public trust because we are on appointment. We add on appointment. The minister is acting. Everybody's acting. Then you take this kind of decision to just deal with political pressure, to look like you are accountable, to avoid institutional reform because you clearly understand this necessity for system overhaul, agent right. Shift, but it's not coming through. So then you now utilize this commonly used tool to just manage crisis. As to whether the crisis is well managed, I don't think so. Looking at the magnitude of political infiltration into in the SAPS, one is worried as to how the acting police commissioner is going to then deliver in this circumstance.
he has chosen that in the interim he will sit and not take any decision until after the conclusion of the Madlanga Commission of inquiry. But as it relates to the Section 207 appointment, making that decision to say that he is going to appoint an acting minister. Your sense of this choice?
Yeah, we sound like Hollywood, It's acting, and actors. We are full of actors. I'm constrained to disagree with the previous speaker. I totally agree with her. In my view, is that this special precautionary suspension is paid leave for General Masemola. And the reason why I'm saying it is that Masemola is not returning to this position at all. According to my very quick research here, he was appointed 31st of March 2022, and his 5 years is going to expire next year, March. Now, there will be about 15 accused in this particular case. And it will be a tedious process. It will take more or less about 4 years to finalize this matter, because each or most of them will have different lawyers, and that is chaos. I think that the president is kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, so the experts are saying we are tired of this Hollywood government where everybody's acting in every department. Someone is suspended and someone is acting. We have so many actors. We've become a Hollywood bureaucracy. What's interesting for me about how all of this corruption stuff comes up is that the same mainstream media who is responsible for the messaging that creates the corruption are always the first ones to make a big noise about it when it comes up and kind of fake asking, how could we fix this? We could fix it by cancelling the messaging of the mainstream media, which cancels the messaging of the ANC, which can only produce corruption.
In a healthy society, the more you help or the more you do for others, the higher your regard. And ideally, you get to a position where the people who are contributing the most are regarded the most. And that's what we mean by hierarchy. Now, what happens in the communist society is you deliberately create a perverse hierarchy. In other words, the people who are the most corrupt, the most willing to lie, the most willing to dob their neighbor into the authorities, the most willing to cheat, the most willing to steal, they become the ones in charge. They are the ones on top of the hierarchy. And the decent, honest, hardworking person becomes the bottom of the hierarchy. And the inevitable product of that is that society becomes less productive. It becomes less constructive in the way that it does things. And one of the reasons, I think, for the economic underperformance, if we put it diplomatically, of communist societies is that it creates a false hierarchy and with perverse incentives, where the cream sits at the bottom and quite often is eliminated, literally eliminated, and all of the, I won't say what, rises to the top and governs everything.
Can't say it better. South Africa is not a communist country, but ANC are trying to shift South Africa closer to communism by saying the most important thing in South Africa is to get equality, which is what communism ultimately becomes, and at the expense of growth. That's why even the ANC, when you talk about growth, they say, yeah, but we want inclusive growth. In other words, it's another word for equality. And it's amazing that anytime we have seen a Marxist economy, a Marxist country, corruption is high. Why does this happen? Well, I have never seen an explanation better than this one. Why do Marxist countries end up with lots of corruption? This is the best answer I've ever seen. The problem is that resources and benefits are not created equal. So, perfect example. Let's say you build a single apartment building. Even if you make all the apartments have the same floor plan and amenities, they will simply not be equal. Why? Some will be top floor with lots of sunshine, others will be ground floor and dark. You can't change physics, you can't change sunshine. So you have to deal with inequality of resources, and real life inequality is far worse than a perfectly constructed apartment building with identical floor plans. But then in capitalism, the market deals with inequality of resources. If you're rich, you buy the sunny one. If you're poor, you buy the dark one. So even though you built the building trying to make everyone equal, the sun has just introduced inequality, because inequality is a fact of life. So what happens when the government's involved in making everyone equal? Well, in economic communism, you give the power to the state to decide who gets the sunny one. You do all sorts of stuff because the state is making sure who gets it. That's when the inherent corruption of the system happens with perfectly well-intentioned actors. So the intention was trying to empower previously disadvantaged. What happens next? Well, let's say you are comrade. It's your job to decide who will get which apartment in that house. People know that. So all of a sudden, you have various families trying to cozy up to you, being really nice to you, wanting to get to know you, bringing you presents, commenting on how great you look. Why? Well, when you took on your job, you didn't know you were going to be famous. They just want a sunny apartment, and they know you are the person who can make it happen. That's a tiny example of the type of who you know is what you get corruption. This is what happens. South Africans keep going with the media supporting everything that needs to be fixed in the country. They say the government must. BEE is right because the intentions are right. The government wants to empower the black people. All you are telling me as an entrepreneur is I must start getting close to comrades. Here's what happens. The best entrepreneurs don't wanna go to some comrade calling, Chief, we need to engage robustly, Chief. No real entrepreneur wants to talk to that fool. So what happens? All the losers start thinking, how do I get close to Chief? As soon as you get close to Chief, you're also close to corruption. Because how do you convince Chief to give you the tender, to give you the percentage, to talk to the people who are looking for BE, to give you the black funding, black whatever that fund is called? All the losers run there because they're willing to pay a bribe. What happens to the people with integrity who don't want to pay a bribe to Chief? Well, they just step aside and find things that they can do without having to pay a bribe. So what happens with the 100 billion empowerment fund? Corrupt. What happens with the tenders? Because how do you get a tender? Get close to Chief. Then the tenders are all corrupt, because in putting equality above growth, well, you make same apartment buildings, but the sun hits the one at the top. So now you must get close to Chief so that you can get the sunny apartment, because you can't just get it the normal way. So it's very funny to me that the same mainstream media that pushes this equality is our highest value thing, which creates corruption, when the corruption comes, the same media is going, how are we going to fix this? Institutional. Institutions respond to the values. The Marxist values demand institutions to be corrupt, demands the police to be weak. Why? Well, because first of all, under Mbeki, he would have been the first one to be arrested. Arms deal, that Leleti Kumalo thing where money was stolen, it was all protected. Under Zuma, he would have had to be the first one in jail. So he had to get rid of the scorpions. Under Ramaphosa, he's pretending to be building the justice system, but he'll be the first one in jail. Why? Because this Marxist thought pattern that equality is the most important value in the country naturally makes things corrupt, because the chiefs are all filthy hands. Like he said, the ANC is the number one accused. So you have to keep the justice system weak because you must protect the comrades. Because it has not lifted black people out of poverty. It has not lifted them very much educationally, but it has raised the corruption. Not because they had bad intentions, they just had a bad philosophy. The foolishness of man undermines his way, ruining whatever he undertakes. Then his heart is resentful and rages against the Lord. For being a fool, he blames the Lord instead of himself. It corrupts everything. Then when the corruption shows up, his heart is resentful and rages. Then everyone's watching Madlanga Commission as if anything interesting's happening there. Of course it's supposed to end up like that. Then we're watching who's stealing where. But of course, once you put equality above freedom, above growth, what happens is corruption. So there's no point raging as if this just came out of heaven on us. But this is what happens in South Africa. That's why I make every video, just to tell you no man can serve two masters. Because either he'll love the one and hate the other, or he'll despise the one and honor the other. Because you can't serve God, the author of Good, Bad, Right, Wrong, Successful or Failing, and Karl Marx, the author of Equality, the author of Oppressed, Oppressors, Oppressors Fight for Equality. You can't serve both. You do this one, you'll end up a liar. You do this one, you'll just work hard and build your country, hold hands with other citizens, and everybody comes out better. You do this one, everybody becomes a liar. And so you just end up with the thieves at the top and the real talent that grows the country at the bottom. And then we make a noise as if, where did this corruption come from? It came from what you've been promoting, mainstream media. So thank you so much to everyone. I really appreciate Prosperity Pledge. You want to keep us on air? Really appreciate it. And you haven't had the opportunity, go down to the first comment and just click that button. We'll appreciate your pat on the back, just you pushing us forward, saying keep going, boy, keep going, don't you give up, let them call your names, just keep going. So let's make history together. Cheers.